TMCnet at NextCom 2008.
Good morning once again. Welcome to NextCon 2008 from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm Erik, and I'm sitting here with Hitachi's Scott Wilkinson, who is Vice President of Product Management and Systems Engineering. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So I've had a lot of conversations already the last couple of days about GPON. What's your take on the GPON market today?
Well, in certain areas it's still doing very, very well. Obviously Verizon's rolling out as fast as they can. There are other areas where people were building based on new development, and when houses aren't being built, those don't go in quite as fast. So what we're seeing is not so much that predictions are going down, but that they're being pushed out a lot. This is sort of a pause, a chance for a break, especially in the utility, municipality, development market. Because of the housing crisis, new developments aren't being built. A lot of their plans were for GPON to go in, PON in general to go in the new builds first and then go into the brownfields. So we're seeing a bit of a slowdown. But no one's turning down their forecasts for the future.
So the future is still bright?
The future still has a lot of potential.
And what kind of new technologies and PON technologies do you think we're looking at?
Well, right now, GPON really has enough for what most people want to put in.
Right.
Obviously, if AT&T can put in copper, then GPON is significantly higher bandwidth than that. What people are looking at now is what's coming in the future. There have been several announcements about WDM PON as maybe an interim step to the true standards-based next-gen, which is 10G PON. Both the IEEE and the ITU are standardizing on 10G as the next generation of PON technology. Some of the WDM things that are being announced, they're all proprietary. They're all interim steps towards that true next generation PON.
Interesting. How much help are you seeing from standards bodies and organizations like that in terms of addressing interoperability and things like that?
Well, the IEEE, their push is not necessarily interoperability except at the physical layer. So the IEEE standard, which should be out in 2009 for 10G PON in particular, will specify physical layer, will specify things like protocols, but not necessarily interoperability at the management layer, just like they did with the EPON standard. You get a lot of different vendors, they can't necessarily work together. The ITU, on the other hand, is very interested in all the layers. They want to make sure that you can plug anybody into anything. And while that hasn't happened a whole lot with GPON, you are seeing it happen with some, and you have now independent ONT vendors who can interoperate with a variety of OLT vendors. Unfortunately, that means the ITU version of the 10G PON standard is going to be a little late. Probably be at least 6 months to a year after the IEEE version, but that's the version that's going to get you a lot better interoperability if that's your goal, and that's what leads to lower costs.
Absolutely, there certainly is a huge focus on interoperability these days. It has to be. You talk about 10G PON. What about 40?
Well, 40G, not really on the PON right now. It's just too expensive to put that at somebody's house. Typically the lasers are too hot. You wouldn't want somebody to cut one up and cut their hand off or burn their eyes out or something like that. But 40G for transport is something that Hitachi, being such a broad company, is another technology that we're very interested in. We haven't made any announcements in North America, but we have deployed a 40G product in Japan. And the demand is coming from 40G routers, where you want to do a 40G router interconnect. The cost for 40G components isn't low enough yet where it gets to that mass deployment in replacing 10G. 10G has reached that for 2.5, and they're a commodity at this point. Everybody's deploying a 10G product. It's hard to find a 2.5G product. 40G hasn't reached that yet. There is demand for router interconnects for true 40G clear circuits, and that demand will continue to rise, but the large demand where it goes everywhere throughout the metro and long haul is probably another 6 months to a year out. Let the cost come down a little bit more.
Now, you mentioned the Japanese market, and Hitachi, of course, has a Japanese parent company, right?
Yes.
What other differences do you see between Japanese and North American carriers?
Well, in Japan, there's a couple of differences. First of all, they aren't debating whether or not 50 meg or 20 meg is the maximum. They've already been providing 100 meg bidirectional for years. Their view is if we provide the network, people will find a way to use it. But the difference over there is that your carrier is not necessarily your ISP or your voicemail provider or your video provider. In fact, they can't be your broadcast video provider. It's illegal. The national carrier can't be your broadcast provider as well. So their networks and their services are very different from ours. They've built out fiber everywhere, And in North America, when we talk about homes passed with fiber, they don't talk about those in Japan because you get numbers like 175%. 2 or 3 carriers go by with fiber. So it's a very, very different market. They believe very much in high-speed bandwidth. 100 meg is almost too slow now. They're starting to deploy EPON to get you faster, putting gigabit in people's homes. And meanwhile, in the United States, we debate whether or not 20 or 50 meg is going to be enough, and it's a very, very different approach.
Competitively speaking, how do the competitive environments there and here compare?
It's different there as well. Although in North America, when you want a very high-speed connection, these days you pretty much have to go with one of two: your cable company or your phone company. In Japan, there are a variety. The power company has a fiber network that you can go on. And again, the ISP doesn't necessarily have to be your fiber provider, but Yahoo Broadband is over there putting in a network. The various NTTs are putting in networks. You can call up an ISP and say in Japan, I want your ISP, but I want a fiber connection. They will give you a choice of fiber providers. That's very, very different from what we're used to.
Why does it seem that here in North America we're always playing catch up, either to the Asian market or to the European markets?
I think it's a different demographic for one thing. We're a much bigger country, a lot more things to worry about. We have a stock market that pummels you when you come out with big capital improvements projects. You just look at Verizon stock compared to AT&T stock, and you can see exactly the results of that. So in that case, we've had to step back a little bit. Part of it is that we have areas of the country that just aren't as technologically advanced. Personally, we're living in Georgia in the southeast. Georgia started a program up to try to get more and more broadband to more people. And what they discovered in some cities is people didn't understand why they needed it. That's a problem that needs to be solved in a lot of rural areas. Once the kids understand it, then we solve it. In fact, we have a deployment in Bandon, Oregon, where we've put a video on the web where they went around and interviewed these kids who now suddenly have access to broadband and how it's incredibly enhanced their lives. But now you're seeing the older people in Bandon, Oregon use it too. There's an interview on there as well with a woman who can now communicate with her deaf son who lives far away over the internet. So it's a matter of education, getting the demand out there, getting the pull through, getting the government to understand that this needs to be done, whether they get directly involved or just make it easier regulatory-wise.
And switching gears a little bit, you mentioned, talked a little bit about video over broadband. Where's the IPTV market stand? Is IPTV gaining traction, gaining acceptance?
In Europe, it's doing very, very well. And obviously in Asia, it's done very well. But what we're discovering in North America is there have been some well-publicized missteps and slowdowns. And when people are looking at their cash expenditure now, they're looking at IPTV as a little bit more than they want to take a chance on. So we all thought that when GPON came out with 2.5 gigabits available to every house, that would be it. You wouldn't see RF video anymore. But more and more, we're getting requests for an RF video plant along with GPON. And we're having to spend a lot more time with RF than we had expected to.
Is that a trend you think will continue?
I don't think so. I think there needs to just be some more widespread announcements of success. The announcements of failure were very, very popular. Right. A lot of people heard about Microsoft having problems at AT&T. They've heard about problems at Utopia. These things have all made, especially the small guys, really nervous. And RF is cheap. You can go buy it off eBay. So that's something they understand.
But you think IPTV is
absolutely? It's going to have to. It's going to have to be. There's so many things you can do when you go to an IP format. There's so many interactive services. There's so much more rich content when you go to that. And the IP vendors are working on that, making it easier, making it more plug and play, making the middleware more stable. And our consumer electronics group, we build televisions as well, is starting to put IP TV capabilities in the TVs in anticipation of that. So rather than having an IP set-top box, you'll just actually plug your Ethernet cable directly in the TV and get it that way.
Wow, that's fantastic. I wasn't aware of that. We've been talking with Hitachi's Scott Wilkinson. Scott, thank you for your insights.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks.